Some dreams are for special people, you're not one of them. That's what my father said the night I told him I wanted to apply to Westfield University. I was 16, sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of brochures and a heart full of hope. He didn't even look up from his laptop. Be realistic, Jess. We're not the kind of family that wastes money on art and ambition. Meanwhile, in the next room, my younger sister Rachel was getting fitted for her third tutoring package, this time for AP Latin. It was at that moment I realized I wasn't just the older child, I was the expendable one. Before delving into this story full of injustice, quiet defiance, and a graduation they never saw coming, let me know where you're watching from and hit like if you've ever been told to aim lower just because of who you are. It was Christmas morning when the truth wrapped itself in shiny paper and ribbons. The fireplace crackled in the background, and soft holiday music floated through the house. Our living room smelled like pine and cinnamon candles. On the surface, it appeared to be a Norman Rockwell painting, but I'd already learned that beauty didn't mean fairness. Rachel sat cross-legged in front of the tree, eyes wide, tearing through wrapping paper like a child in a toy commercial. "Oh my God, an iPad Pro!" she squealed, holding it up like a trophy. Mom clapped her hands. "We knew you needed something powerful for your digital portfolio." Dad nodded, camera in hand, snapping photo after photo. "This'll help with college applications. A real investment." I reached for the small box with my name on it. The wrapping was recycled from last year. Inside, 3 pairs of white socks. No note, no explanation. Just socks. I laughed softly, but it wasn't humor. It was the kind of laugh that tried to fill the space where disappointment had taken root. "Thanks," I managed. Mom barely glanced up. "Thought you could use more for your shifts at the diner." "Non-slip right," Rachel beamed, scrolling through her new screen. "This is so fast, thanks, guys." She didn't even look at me. And honestly, why would she? The room belonged to her. So did the celebration. I was just there to keep things balanced, to smile and disappear quietly. Later, I stood at the sink doing dishes while Rachel and Mom posted pictures on Facebook. So proud of our future star. The iPad was in the center frame. I was cropped out entirely. I used to think I was imagining things, that I was too sensitive or taking things too personally. But that morning crystallized it. I wasn't second best. I was the second priority. Maybe even third. And yet I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I folded the receipt from the sock box and put it in my back pocket, then went upstairs. I pulled out a sketchbook, one of the few gifts I'd bought myself last summer with tip money. And I drew the fireplace, the tree, the torn wrapping, Rachel's triumph, and my socks, all of it. I wanted to remember. Not to wallow, but to build a record, because I knew then that one day I would show the world exactly what you can do with nothing but belief and bitter fuel. I closed the book and whispered to myself, "They don't see it yet. But they will." Next Christmas would look very different. But first I had to make it to spring, when college acceptances would arrive. I still remember the day I won the regional art contest. It was pouring rain, and my charcoal sketch of a steel mill, our town's pride, took first place among seniors from 4 counties. My name was announced in the school gym over the crackling PA system. A few kids clapped. My art teacher hugged me. I walked home with the ribbon tucked carefully inside my notebook, heart-pounding face soaked from more than just rain. That night at dinner, I placed the ribbon gently on the table. "I won," I said. "First place." The judge said my composition had depth beyond my years. Mom glanced at it briefly, then returned to folding Rachel's audition schedule. "That's nice, honey. Don't forget to take the trash out tonight." Dad didn't even look up from his iPad. "Is the prize money taxable?" Rachel across the table rolled her eyes. They give ribbons for anything now. The air was still. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat, trying not to let it matter, but it did. It always did. A week later, Rachel placed third in a regional spelling bee. You'd think she discovered a cure for cancer. Balloons, a photo op in the driveway, a cake that read Rachel Rocks. I stood to the side holding a tray of juice cups for the neighbors, the same hands that had drawn shadows and texture with such care a week before. At school, Mr. Sanderson, the art teacher, pinned my sketch on the front display board. "This girl's got vision," he told the class. "Keep an eye on Jessica Harper." When I came home that day, I found my drawing folded on the kitchen counter, stained with grape jelly. Mom had needed the board space to hang Rachel's summer camp brochure. She's applying to that New York music intensive. "Big deal, Jess," Mom said. "We need to focus on what could take someone somewhere." I stood there staring at the smear across my work. "Art is somewhere," I whispered. They didn't hear me, so I started collecting every award certificate and newspaper clipping in a box under my bed. Not to prove anything to them, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining my worth. Every time I received praise at school, it was followed by silence at home. Not rejection, something worse. Indifference. But I wasn't going to let silence shape me. I started entering every competition I could find. Local, state, online. I kept pushing. Until one day my economics teacher handed me an envelope with the state business competition letterhead and a gold seal. "You made it to regionals," he said. "You beat out students from elite prep schools." And that's when I knew I wasn't just good with a pencil. I had a mind for more than sketches. But is that enough for them to see me? I'll find out soon. College application season was coming. There was one place in the world where I wasn't invisible. Grandma Eleanor's lake house sat at the edge of Pine Hollow, nestled between whispering trees and the still blue water that seemed to hold its breath for you. We went every summer, Rachel, my parents, and me, but I was the only one who saw it as something more than just a getaway. It was freedom. My parents would unload the car, set Rachel up with her dance videos and her precious ring light. Yes, she had one even back then. And disappear into their routine of grilled chicken crossword puzzles and correcting me under their breath. But Grandma saw me. "Bring that sketch pad, Jess," she'd say after breakfast, waving her straw hat like a summons. "Let's go chase shadows." We'd sit by the water in lawn chairs older than I was, and I'd draw whatever caught my eye, the curve of her elbow, holding a mug, the dragonflies flicking across the surface, the way the sky melted into the lake at dusk, and she would watch me. Not just politely. Deeply. "You see things," she said once, her voice like warm bread. "Not just with your eyes. That's rare. Don't ever let anyone teach you out of that." I didn't cry then, but I wanted to. No one had ever talked to me like that before, not as a daughter, not as a student, not even as a person. Sometimes we'd go inside and sit in her little library. Dusty shelves held biographies, old business books, and stories of people who'd made something out of nothing. She'd read aloud while I sketched Oprah's beginnings, Sarah Blakely's hustle stories of American grit and wild hope. Her voice made them real. "You could do this, Jess," she'd say, tapping the book's spine. "You've got the brain for business and the heart of an artist. That's dangerous in all the right ways." Back in town, that idea would get laughed out of the room. Business Dad would scoff. "What business hires teenage girls with sketchbooks?" Rachel once added. "Maybe if you sell on Etsy, for like coffee money." But Grandma planted seeds. Real ones. And I watered them with every summer we spent at that lake. One night, while Rachel was on her phone filming a dance reel and my parents were watching cable news inside Grandma, and I sat under the stars wrapped in a blanket. "I won't always be here," she said softly. "But you'll remember this, the water, the books, the way the sky didn't ask for permission to be beautiful." And I did. I still do. Because that summer sitting beside her, I quietly made a decision. I was going to apply to Westfield University anyway. Whether they believed in me or not. By junior year, I had two things taped to my bedroom wall: a Westfield University brochure and my work schedule from Benny's Diner. The first was a dream. The second was reality, cold, greasy, and permanently red with a marker. Every weekday after school, I threw on my black apron, pulled my hair into a bun, and took bus route 17 straight to Benny's. I wiped tables that never stayed clean, refilled coffee for truckers and exhausted nurses, and smiled through tips that barely covered the cost of gas. Then I'd go home, scrub the bacon smell from my skin, and open my calculus book at midnight with hands that still smelled like soap and fryer oil. I did this 5 days a week. On weekends, I added tutoring middle school algebra and SAT prep for kids whose parents could afford it, all while keeping a 4.0 GPA. I didn't have the luxury of stumbling. Rachel, meanwhile, dropped out of robotics club because it was too mathy, then got a shout-out in the school newsletter for attending a 2-week Model UN camp that cost more than our yearly grocery budget. Mom called it networking for future leaders. I called it expected. When I won the school's business pitch contest, $500 in scholarship money, and a meeting with a local mentor, I came home glowing. Dad was in the garage fixing Rachel's car window. "That's great, Jess," he said, without looking up. "Can you grab me a wrench?" I held the certificate in my hand for a little longer, then folded it and slid it into my backpack before fetching the wrench. It wasn't bitterness. Not yet. It was survival. I had to keep moving, even if no one was clapping. The only teacher who saw me was Mr. Becker, my economics teacher. He'd stay after class to go over business models I sketched on napkins from the diner. "You've got grit," he said once. "Grit gets funded, but grit doesn't get recognition at home." At one parent-teacher night, he made an effort. "Jessica's among the top in her class, on track for major scholarships," he told my parents. Mom smiled politely. "Yes, but she's so busy. We worry she's spread too thin." They didn't ask me how I was managing. They assumed I was fine because I always had been. Rachel got the concern, the investment, the pep talks. I got the silence of assumed resilience. But the silence was fuel. I kept grinding Benny's books and back again because every late-night shift and every missed party got me closer to that brochure on my wall. And one cold February afternoon, an envelope arrived with the Westfield seal pressed into heavy cream paper. I didn't open it right away, because I knew this letter wouldn't change how they saw me, but it could change everything else. The envelope was thick, real paper with gold trim and a Westfield University seal pressed deep as if it meant something. My hands shook as I slid my finger beneath the flat breath caught between fear and hope. And then I saw the word. Congratulations. I couldn't breathe. I'd gotten in. Westfield. Business program. Merit-based admittance. I held the letter to my chest like it could anchor me in a storm. That night at dinner, I waited for the right moment. Rachel was talking about her latest theater audition, some regional thing she wasn't even serious about. When she paused to sip her mineral water, I cleared my throat. "I got in," I said. "Westfield, the business program." Dad didn't look up from his phone. "That's nice, Jess." I blinked. "It's the one I've been working toward for years." The front door burst open. Rachel stood there, shrieking, waving her envelope. I got into political science. Suddenly, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. Dad sprang from his chair. Mom gasped like she'd won the lottery. The table shook as they rushed to her arms, wide joy spilling everywhere. Champagne from the back of the fridge. A playlist cued. Sparkling cider poured. And me still sitting. I'm still holding my letter. They didn't ask to read it. It didn't toast me. They didn't even seem to remember I'd said anything at all. I stood, slowly walked my untouched dinner plate to the sink, and turned back just in time to see Mom snapping a picture of Rachel and Dad holding up her letter like a trophy. Rachel caught my eye and smirked. "Don't look so sad." There's only so much spotlight to go around. It was a joke. Maybe not. Later, I found a paper plate in the trash with future Westfield grad written in Sharpie. The pink frosting still smeared across the words. That night, I sat in bed staring at my ceiling fan spinning shadows on the wall. I kept repeating it to myself. You got in. You did. They don't need to clap for it to be real. But a tiny voice whispered back. Why does it only feel half real without them? I didn't sleep much. The next morning, the house was buzzing with talk of dorms, new clothes, and laptops. For Rachel. No one asked what I needed. No one asked how I'd pay for it. And 2 weeks later, they finally told me why. At dinner over lasagna and lemonade, Dad folded his hands and said, "We've made a college decision." And when he finished his sentence, my world split in two. The lasagna was bubbling in the oven, its scent filling the kitchen like a sweet aroma. Mom lit candles, the fancy ones she only brought out when company came over, or someone got a promotion. Rachel wore a new sundress, already beaming as if she knew something I didn't. I sat across from her, napkin in my lap, palms damp. I knew this wasn't just dinner. Dad cleared his throat as he poured lemonade into tall glasses. "We wanted to talk about college," he said, folding his hands like a CEO before a quarterly report. My heart quickened. Mom smiled too brightly. "We're so proud of both of you. Getting into Westfield, that's huge." Rachel tossed her hair and leaned back like she'd just been crowned. But Dad continued. "We've looked at our finances. And after everything this past year, the house repairs your mom's medical bills." He paused and I knew. I didn't know how deep the cut would be. "We've decided to support Rachel's tuition and expenses fully." I blinked, and mine. Dad shifted in his seat. "Jessica, you're resourceful. You've always been independent. We believe in you. You'll find a way." Mom chimed in. "We only have so much saved. And Rachel, well, political science can open doors, but it's a competitive field. She'll need the head start." I stared at them. "So you're betting on her?" Rachel didn't flinch. She picked up her fork. "It's not a bet, Jess. It's just smart." The room spun slightly, the hum of the refrigerator louder than the silence around me. "I've worked every weekend since sophomore year," I said, voice shaking. "I've kept a perfect GPA. I got in on merit." "What more did you want?" "You've done great," Dad said quickly. "Which is why we know you'll land scholarships. You're tough." "Not everyone is." I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the tile. "Excuse me," I muttered, walking upstairs as their voices faded behind me. In my room, I stared at the Westfield brochure still pinned above my desk. It hadn't changed. But everything else had. Downstairs, they laughed at something Rachel said. Maybe she made a joke about me. Perhaps they didn't notice I'd left. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, pulled up every scholarship search engine I could find, and started applying. Because if they wouldn't invest in me, I would. And somewhere deep inside, a new voice whispered, "Let them watch you build it without them." What they didn't know was that my best decisions always came after their worst ones. The next morning, I found them whispering in the kitchen, unaware I'd come down early for coffee. I paused behind the doorframe, something in my chest already bracing for impact. "She deserves it more," Mom said, her voice soft but certain. "Rachel needs the stability. She's not as self-driven as Jessica. Jess will land on her feet. She always does." Dad sighed. "You're right. She's the safe one. Rachel's the one who needs lifting." I stepped back before they saw me, heart thudding in my ears. She deserves it more. That phrase repeated in my head all day like a bitter drumbeat. It didn't matter what I had achieved: straight A's, leadership awards, long nights closing at the diner, and early mornings tutoring math for kids richer than us. To them, my hard work wasn't a reason to invest, it was an excuse to ignore. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't shiny. I didn't need saving. So I didn't get picked. That night, while Rachel posted about her Westfield journey and tried on outfits for campus tours, I locked myself in my room, pulled out a notebook, and listed every scholarship I could find: need-based, merit-based essay contests, foundation grants. Then I drafted a color-coded spreadsheet that was cross-referenced with deadlines. I created templates, personalized every statement, cut and rewrote, over and over. Meanwhile, Rachel spent her nights watching Netflix and asking Dad to pre-order her dorm decorations. She waltzed around the house with her acceptance letter taped to her bedroom door, already deciding which clubs to join. Mom helped her plan outfits. Dad taught her how to budget well, how to use his credit card, and still they looked at me like I had it all figured out. Like self-reliance was a birthmark, not something I'd built through years of being left behind. It was Grandma who called that week. "You okay, honey?" she asked. There was a long pause before I said, "They think Rachel deserves it more." Her voice, though old and raspy, cut like a bell. Deserve is a funny word. What they mean is she fits their version of success. You don't. But the world has a bigger imagination. That night I stayed up past 2 a.m. submitting 3 more applications. My fingers were cramped. My eyes burned. But I kept going. Because I wasn't just trying to prove them wrong, I was building a future they wouldn't recognize until it was too late. And in the middle of that blurry, exhausted week, an email came through. Subject line: finalist for National Future Leaders Scholarship Interview required. Suddenly everything shifted. And they still knew nothing. By March, I had submitted 38 scholarship applications. 38. Each one required a different essay, a different pitch, and a different version of me. Some asked for my story. Others wanted my plan. A few just wanted my pain dressed up like ambition. In between all of that, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs. On weekdays after school, I still worked evenings at Benny's Diner. On Saturdays, I stocked shelves at a discount pharmacy, ensuring every product faced forward just so. And on Sundays, I babysat the Miller twins' wild sugar-fueled toddlers, whose parents left me pizza money and guilt about their second house in Vermont. I barely slept. I lived on instant coffee and determination. My planner resembled a war map filled with deadlines, color codes, and late-night pep talks, written in the margins like prayers. At school, Rachel breezed through the halls talking about color schemes for her dorm room and how excited she was to finally be around people who get her. She asked Mom if she should bring heels in case there are parties. I overheard Dad saying they'd help her rent a car her sophomore year if she needed it. Meanwhile, I was calculating whether I could afford secondhand textbooks and a Metro card. Some days the weight of it hit me in the quiet moments on the bus ride home, in the shower, during slow nights at the diner. I'd catch my reflection and wonder, is this what it looks like to want something too much? But then I'd open my email and see one more. "We're pleased to inform you." Message, and it'd keep me going. Not all responses were good. Some rejections were so impersonal they didn't even get my name right. Others praised my grit but said funds are limited. Still, I tracked every reply. On my wall, I kept a chart. Red pins for rejections, blue for pending, gold for wins. By spring break, I had 7 gold pins. 7. Enough to cover most of my tuition if I can keep my grades and part-time hours up. And one of them, just one, was big enough to change everything: the National Future Leaders Award. Finalist status meant an interview. If I won, it would pay for the full 4 years. I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I wanted to walk into that interview carrying more than my resume. I wanted to carry every slammed door, every overlooked win, every load of dishes and babysitting hour and sock for Christmas memory. Because if I won this, they'd have to say my name, out loud, in full, and maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of the end of their silence. The bank was cold, too bright, and smelled faintly of coffee and copier toner. I sat across from the loan officer, hands clasped tight, heart pounding, in that quiet, desperate way only paperwork can make you feel. He looked up from the screen. "You've got strong academics and great references, but without a cosigner?" I nodded. I'd heard it before. Dad had refused. "Loans are traps," he said, "and frankly, it's not wise for me to put my credit behind an art business degree." Mom just shrugged. "You've always wanted to do things on your own." But I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for belief. The loan officer clicked his pen. "We'll need someone with a solid credit history. A homeowner, ideally." That night I made the call. Grandma answered after one ring. "Jessica." "You okay? I got the loan form," I said quietly. I need someone to sign with me, to say I'm worth the risk." She didn't even hesitate. "Come by tomorrow, sweetheart." I I took the 6:45 bus to Pine Hollow and arrived before the morning fog had even lifted off the lake. Grandma was waiting with coffee and lemon muffins. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a pen, opened the folder, and found the line where her name belonged. "I trust your vision," she said. "And that's more than half the battle in life." I watched her sign her hands, older now but still steady. It felt like she wasn't just writing her name. She was writing me into the future. When we finished, she folded the papers carefully and said, "You know this doesn't mean you owe me." I smiled. "I know, but I'll never forget it." Outside the lake shimmered the same lake we'd sat by every summer. The place where she first told me I could be more than what they saw. That day, I realized something my family may not have believed in me, but someone did. And that belief came wrapped in ink lemon muffins and unconditional love. Back on the bus, I held the folder tight against my chest. They could doubt me. They could underfund me, dismiss me, and hand me socks while handing her iPads. But I had something they didn't see coming. I had Grandma's signature. And that signature would co-sign more than a loan, it would co-sign my next chapter. Because the interview for the National Future Leaders Scholarship was in 3 days, and I was walking in like someone who belonged. Move-in day at Westfield felt like a parade I wasn't invited to. The campus buzzed with energy families hauling mini-fridges, hugging goodbyes, and parents beaming through tearful smiles. Balloons tied to dorm doors fluttered in the breeze. Rachel arrived in our parents' SUV packed to the brim with new bedding storage bins, a desk lamp shaped like a swan, and 2 weeks' worth of Whole Foods snacks. Mom cried as they unpacked her. Dad met her RA and took pictures. Rachel. She barely acknowledged me standing off to the side. I just waved vaguely like I was campus staff. They didn't ask where I was living. Maybe they didn't care. Or perhaps they assumed the school handled it. They didn't. I'd found my place on Craigslist, a tiny shared basement apartment 15 minutes from campus. No AC, 1 window, linoleum floor. The landlord gave me a mattress on the floor and promised to fix the sink next week. I moved in alone. No fanfare. Just me 2 duffel bags, a borrowed microwave, and a checklist that read more like a survival guide than a celebration. That night, while Rachel posted selfies of her decorated dorm, captioned, "Settled in, can't wait to thrive," I was scrubbing mystery stains off a mini fridge someone left behind. I watched her Instagram stories, her first dinner with a roomie, her dorm's sunset view, her candlelit bubble bath she captioned self-care essentials. Meanwhile, I boiled ramen on a camping stove and set a phone alarm every 3 hours to rotate my frozen water bottles so the milk wouldn't spoil. Still, I felt something more profound than resentment. It was clarity. They built her comfort with their hands. I was building my future on my own. Every night I reviewed my budget in Excel, which included rent books, meal planning, and laundry quarters. I walked to campus to save on bus fare. I ate canned beans and dollar store oatmeal, and yet I never missed a class and never showed up unprepared. I sat in the front row of every lecture. One professor, Dr. McIntyre, noticed. "You ask questions like someone who already has skin in the game," he told me after class. I smiled. "That's because I do." Rachel, meanwhile, skipped her 3rd economics class because it was too early, and the vibe felt off. But no one scolded her. No one questioned her priorities. One morning, I passed by her dorm on the way to campus. I saw my parents hugging her goodbye again. They'd brought her a care package, cookies, vitamins, and a Westfield hoodie. I kept walking. They never once visited my basement apartment. I never asked for the address. But soon, someone else would. And when they did, they'd be walking into more than just 4 walls. They'd be stepping into the beginning of something bigger than any dorm. The basement apartment had cracks in the ceiling and pipes that rattled like old bones. But I turned it into something that was mine. A whiteboard hung beside my bed, filled with class schedules, project deadlines, and motivational quotes I copied from Grandma's old business books. Every night I crossed out another day. Every morning I added one more line to my future. I built routines from chaos. Early morning runs cleared my head. Study sessions became sacred. I converted the kitchenette into a war room, half for meal prep and half for brainstorming pitch decks for the student business incubator. My first proposal, an app that connected small local vendors with last-minute delivery drivers. Simple, scalable, real. I presented it in a borrowed blazer and Target heels that blistered my feet. But I won second place. A small grant, campus recognition, a mentor who started emailing me opportunities. Meanwhile, Rachel changed majors twice and hosted dorm parties she tagged with a Bahagard campus queen. She missed advising meetings, skipped midterms. Mom still posted about her leadership spirit. I didn't correct them. I didn't have time to explain what I was doing. I just kept doing it. At work study, I digitized tax files for the university's finance department. My boss, a sharp woman named Carmen, noticed my spreadsheets. "You ever consider consulting?" she asked. "You've got a brain for systems." She invited me to shadow her one day a week. That led to an internship. That internship led to another. By sophomore year, I wasn't just surviving. I was running a freelance bookkeeping service on the side for 3 small businesses. My room still had a mattress on the floor, but beside it, a filing cabinet, a printer, and a whiteboard filled with client names and invoice deadlines. No one at home asked where I had disappeared. They assumed I was just busy. They had no idea I'd been published in the business school's newsletter, or that my pitch had been submitted to a national startup competition, or that I was invited to speak on a panel with alums. They didn't see me on stage. They weren't in the audience, but I didn't need their applause anymore. I was building a life they never imagined for me, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. The world didn't need their permission to recognize me. I had earned my space, and the National Future Leaders Scholarship that interview was coming. So was the moment that would finally undeniably put me on the map. And for once, they'd have no choice but to see it. Rachel had always been the center of the storm, loud, bright, impossible to ignore. But sometime during our second year, the spotlight she lived in started to flicker. She changed her major again, this time from political science to communications, claiming, "It's more aligned with who I am now." She'd started skipping classes regularly, partying harder, and posting filtered selfies captioned with hollow mantras like, "Stay grounded, queens." I bumped into her once near the student union. She was wearing a cashmere hoodie and oversized sunglasses, carrying an $8 smoothie that she said tasted like regret. When I asked how things were going, she sighed dramatically. "This place just doesn't get me. I feel stuck." I didn't say it, but I did know. I'd felt stuck for most of my life until I fought my way out. Word spread on campus Rachel had failed 2 midterms. She was put on academic probation. She missed a tuition deadline and blamed it on the financial aid office, though I overheard her telling a friend she forgot to check email for like a month. Mom called me a few days later, not to ask how I was doing, not to congratulate me on the article I'd just published in Westfield Women in Business. No, she called crying because Rachel was under so much pressure, and college is just harder than it used to be. I asked carefully, "Is she okay? She's overwhelmed?" Mom sniffled. "She needs support. Maybe we'll send her to a retreat. Let her reset. A retreat." When I'd been overwhelmed, they told me to toughen up. When I cried, they asked if I was being dramatic. When I didn't sleep for 3 nights working 2 jobs and studying for finals, Dad told me I should manage my time better. But Rachel, she was being nurtured through failure, swaddled in emotional apologies. I hung up that night, feeling like I'd been erased all over again. But part of me wasn't surprised. This wasn't new. This was the pattern. My struggle turned invisible, and her battle turned sacred. Still, I stayed focused. The National Future Leaders Scholarship interview was the next morning. I'd already picked out my blazer, rehearsed my story, and triple-checked the Zoom link. I didn't need them to notice anymore, because the next time my name came up, it wouldn't be in the context of someone else's breakdown. It would be the headline they never saw coming. Thanksgiving break had always been complicated, but that year it came with silence. No texts, No invitation. No mention of a seat at the table. At first, I assumed they were just busy. Then Rachel posted a photo, her mom, dad, 2 cousins, and even the neighbor's dog, all smiling around a perfectly golden turkey. The caption, "So grateful for family and peace this year." I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. There was no peace in being erased. I called Mom, trying not to sound hurt. "Hey, just wondering what time I should come by." She hesitated. "Oh, sweetie. We didn't want to stress you. You've been working so hard." And honestly, what? She sighed. "Jess, you can be intense. You always want to discuss school, your goals, and your projects. It's just a lot. Rachel needs a calm space right now, so I wasn't invited home because I was too focused, too serious, too much." Meanwhile, Rachel, who had skipped half her classes and barely passed midterms, was being celebrated as the fragile one, the one who needed quiet joy. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I went to the fridge, pulled out a leftover rotisserie chicken, and ate Thanksgiving dinner on a plastic plate while watching a TED Talk on women in leadership. Later, I went to the library. It was mostly empty and quiet, except for the hum of vending machines and the sound of keys tapping in the distance. I found a booth by the window, opened my laptop, and polished my pitch deck for the national competition. It wasn't bitterness that drove me, it was fire. Every rejection. Every overlooked holiday. Every time they made me feel like ambition was a character flaw. I poured it into my work. And it showed. 2 days later, I got an email from the scholarship committee. Subject: you've been selected as the recipient of the National Future Leaders Award. My vision blurred. I read it twice. Then again. Then I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. No one had clapped for me at a Thanksgiving table, but a room of decision-makers had seen my worth and invested in it. I called Grandma first. She screamed, then she cried. You always did shine brighter when they tried to dim you. And just like that, everything shifted. Now that I had the funding, I had the title. And soon I'd have something even more undeniable, proof that everything they overlooked was precisely what made me unstoppable. The scholarship gala was held at the Mayfair Hotel downtown, a place I'd only ever passed by on my way to late shifts and student forums. That night, I stepped through its gilded doors in a navy dress I bought secondhand and tailored by hand, wearing heels I'd reheated in the oven to mold to my feet. The room shimmered crystal chandeliers, silver chargers, and centerpieces taller than my dorm bookshelf. Servers glided past with flutes of champagne and salmon bites on tiny forks. I was seated at table 6. My name was printed in gold script beside a linen napkin folded like a swan, and sitting beside me was a U.S. Senator. She smiled as I took my seat. Jessica, I've read about your app proposal. Impressive work. I blinked. Thank you, ma'am. I didn't expect anyone here to know my name. She chuckled. Leaders should know where the future's coming from. Throughout the evening, she asked thoughtful questions about my background, my startup vision, and my experiences balancing school and work. She didn't flinch when I mentioned my basement apartment or my Craigslist mattress. Instead, she leaned in closer. That grit will take you farther than any trust fund. They called my name during the award presentation. I walked onto that stage, heart-racing spotlight, burning against my skin, and accepted a plaque that felt heavier than it looked. I didn't see my parents in the crowd. I didn't expect to. But I looked out across the audience, administrators, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and I knew I belonged. After the ceremony, a man approached me with his card. We're looking for a summer fellow. You'd be perfect. Paid position. DC. I nearly dropped my clutch. Back at my table, the senator raised her glass toward me. To women who make their tables when no one saves them a seat, I smiled, swallowing the lump in my throat. I thought about Thanksgiving. About the voicemail I never responded to. About Rachel's latest meltdown over a missed hair appointment. I thought about all the years I'd been told I was too much, too ambitious, too intense. And here I was, sitting next to power, not begging for it. That night, as I walked out of the Mayfair and into the chilly night air, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like momentum. And something told me this was only the beginning, because what came next would bring them back into my life in a way none of us saw coming. The sun was sharp and unrelenting on graduation morning, but I stood tall beneath it, cap in hand, gown perfectly pressed. The stadium buzzed with families clutching balloons, flowers and banners with names scrawled in glitter. I scanned the crowd, not expecting to see them, but still hoping. Then I did. There they were. My parents, Rachel, sitting 5 rows back, clutching a small bouquet, looking confused, like they were in the wrong place, but too proud to admit it. Because this ceremony wasn't hers, it was mine. I was valedictorian. They hadn't known. No one told them because no one thought to call the people who never showed up. When my name was called, full honors and all, I stepped onto the stage, the first in our family to graduate college. The applause was thunderous. My heart beat louder. I saw it in their faces. The disbelief. The realization. Their daughter, the one too intense, too driven, too much, was now standing before thousands addressing the graduating class as the student with the highest academic and leadership distinctions. My speech wasn't a dig. I didn't name names. But I spoke my truth. I've learned that sometimes the people who love you don't understand your journey. And sometimes the ones who cheer the loudest didn't clap at your first step. But that doesn't make your path any less worthy. It makes your arrival that much more earned. I saw Dad shift in his seat. Mom's eyes glistened. Rachel looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. After the ceremony, as students reunited with their families, for photos, hugs, and champagne, I walked past them. Not away, but through. Calm, collected. Mom stood first. Jessica, we had no idea. Why didn't you? I did tell you, I said gently. You just never asked. They didn't know what to say. I didn't wait for them to find words. Instead, I joined my mentor Carmen and the senator, who had attended the gala, having shown up unannounced, to congratulate me again. They brought flowers. They smiled with genuine pride. They saw me. That evening, I posted a photo me in my cap and gown standing on the university seal. The caption earned, not gifted. It went viral within my network. Comments poured in from professors, classmates, and even strangers. And somewhere in that flood I knew. This chapter had closed on my terms. But the next. It would start with a will, reading one that would reveal just how much Grandma had seen all along. They sent flowers the next day. A bouquet of lilies and roses with a card that read, "So proud of you, Jess. Love, Mom and Dad." It arrived at my internship office, and for a moment I just stared at it. Proud now. After years of silence, after being told I was too much, after sitting out holidays and celebrations they'd only extended to Rachel. This was the grand gesture. My coworkers gathered around the delivery, as if it were a sweet treat. "Aw, from your parents?" someone asked. I nodded, managing a polite smile. But inside, something felt like it was sinking. Not sadness, not bitterness, just emptiness. Because the validation didn't land. It was late, and it felt forced, like someone had whispered, "This looks bad. You should do something." Later that night, Dad called. His voice was unusually soft. "Hey, sweetheart. I saw that article about your speech in the Tribune." "Impressive." "Thanks," I said flatly. "We're so proud of you," he added. "You've become something." Become something. Like I hadn't always been something, they just hadn't looked close enough. I wanted to scream. To remind him of every night I'd fallen asleep with textbooks as pillows, every missed birthday party because I was working late, every scholarship application I filled out. At the same time, Rachel got prom dresses and party money. But I didn't. Because I no longer needed them to understand. They hadn't shown up for the work, so they didn't get to own the win. Instead, I said thank you. And let the silence do what years of shouting never could. I didn't invite them to the summer leadership retreat, where I had the opportunity to pitch my startup to real investors. I didn't forward the offer letter from the fellowship in DC to them. I hadn't even told them I'd been named one of the 30 under 30 women reshaping tech. Because the truth is, you can't force someone to recognize your value. You can only rise and let the distance speak louder than your presence ever did. But just as I was settling into this new version of myself, independent, focused, moving on, something unexpected arrived in my inbox. A notice. Probate court will be convening on the estate of Eleanor James. You are listed as a beneficiary. Grandma. She was gone, and she'd left something behind, something that would shift every power dynamic in my family forever. The email sat unopened in my inbox for a day, maybe two. The subject line, probate notification estate of Eleanor James, felt like a punch wrapped in legalese. I wasn't ready to admit Grandma was gone. She'd been the only one who looked at me and saw more than rebellion. She saw purpose. Still, life doesn't wait, especially not for grief. The reading was set for the following Thursday. A small county courthouse near the lake house where we used to sit on the porch eating orange slices and playing Scrabble. When I walked in, Rachel was already there. Designer sunglasses, pouty expression, scrolling through her phone like she was at brunch. Mom and Dad flanked her like a secret service. They barely acknowledged me, just stiff nods. But I didn't come for them. I came for her. The attorney cleared his throat. Per the last will of Eleanor James. He read off a few small gifts, knickknacks, family heirlooms, then paused. To my granddaughter, Jessica Lynn James, who saw my worth long before anyone else saw hers, I leave the lake house, the full savings account associated with it, and the letters in the attic. Silence. Dead. Quiet. Rachel turned, mouth slightly open. What Mom's eyes widened, then narrowed. Dad coughed. That can't be right. But it was. Grandma had transferred the deed a year prior. The lawyer had the documents, witnesses, and suddenly everything shifted. They weren't in control anymore. Afterward, they cornered me outside. Rachel stepped forward first. Jess, maybe we should talk. You know, now that we're older, I shook my head gently. I didn't do this to win. I just stopped losing. Mom's voice was tight. We didn't realize how much it all meant to you. I smiled, sad, not bitter. That's the thing. You were never supposed to realize. You were supposed to care. They offered dinner, an opportunity to discuss things further. But I declined, not out of spite, out of clarity. Because healing doesn't always require reunion. Sometimes it needs release. I no longer needed their recognition. I had peace, and I had the keys to the one place I'd always felt seen. But the most surprising part of Grandma's will wasn't the lake house. It was the envelope she left me sealed in her handwriting, and inside a truth that would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. 12 months after Grandma's will changed everything, I stood on the deck of the lake house, my lake house, with a laptop in one hand and coffee in the other, looking out at a view that used to be the background of my dreams. The same house where I first dared to believe I was worth something now served as headquarters for a nonprofit. I founded one that helped first-generation college students navigate the very chaos I had survived alone. I named it Quiet Fire, because that's what I had become. Not flashy, not loud, but unstoppable. We'd already matched 30 students with full-ride scholarships. I'd spoken on 2 panels, one in DC and one in Austin. I even got a shout-out from a senator who once brushed past me at that gala. It was surreal, but it was earned. Every 3 a.m. shift. Every no I turned into not yet. Every tear shed in silence while Rachel got toasted for showing up. It all added up to this. They still didn't fully understand. A few months back, Mom sent an email asking if I'd mentor Rachel. She'd dropped out again, now toying with the idea of starting her own thing. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I was done carrying people who once cut the ground from under me. Dad tried too. He offered to invest in my nonprofit as if my years of solitude could be settled like a check. I thanked him for the offer and declined. I told him we were funded growing and rooted in integrity. That last part stung, I think. And I meant every word. My team, primarily young women of color from similar backgrounds, surprised me on the anniversary of our launch. They framed a quote of mine from our first meeting. "We're not here because we're broken. We're here because we're brilliant and underestimated." I choked up when I saw it. Because that was the truth of my life, underestimated but unbroken. And just when I thought that chapter was closed, when I believed the arc had reached its end, I opened the envelope Grandma left behind. Inside wasn't money. It was a story. A name. A choice she'd made decades ago that rewrote everything I believed about our family. About myself. And now I had one more door to open, one that could bring answers. Or ignite an entirely new battle. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. It was a letter from Grandma written years before her passing. Inside, she confessed something no one else had dared say out loud. "I saw how they treated you, Jess. I tried to speak up once, and your mother said I was too old to understand modern parenting. But I knew the truth. Favoritism doesn't evolve. It just hides better." She went on to share her own story, how she too had been the lesser daughter denied opportunity and approval. That lake house wasn't just an escape for her. It was her act of rebellion. And now her gift to me wasn't just property, it was legacy. A declaration that the cycle would end with me. I wept not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen in a way no celebration or headline could ever deliver. At that moment, I understood that I didn't need to win their love. I built something greater. I built self-worth. Because love rooted in approval can be revoked, but love grounded in truth that never wavers. I no longer cared about the dinners I wasn't invited to the Hollow, "We're so proud" texts, or the silence that used to gnaw at my confidence. They had their story, and I had mine. Mine was carved from stone earned, not given. Rachel's story, that's hers to write. I don't resent her anymore. She wasn't the architect of the injustice, I just stopped letting her benefit from it. A few months later, I stood again on a stage, this time at my nonprofit's annual scholarship ceremony. Dozens of students, their families, and even some from my old town filled the room. I looked out and realized something. Every one of them was someone like me. Someone who had been told, "Not for people like you." And yet there we were. Before I closed the event, I read Grandma's final words aloud. "Don't waste your energy proving them wrong. Use it to prove yourself right." That line hit harder than any applause, because that's what I had done. Quietly, relentlessly, honestly. And now I pass that fire on. If you've ever been overlooked, underappreciated, or pushed aside, know this. Your worth isn't dependent on their permission. It's forged in every choice you make to keep going, even when no one's watching. That's how legacies are born. So no, I didn't win their love, but I found peace. I found purpose. I found myself. And somewhere I think Grandma's watching from that same old porch, proud in a way that matters. I'm proud the cycle broke. Proud I rose. Proud I stayed kind. This is my story. What's yours? Subscribe to catch more inspiring stories and share yours in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it.